15 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on National Defence. Pursuant to the motion adopted on October 23, 2025, the committee is meeting to resume consideration of Bill C-11, an act to amend the National Defence Act and other acts. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person and remotely via Zoom application. Before we begin, I ask all participants to consult the guidelines on the table. These measures are to help prevent audio and feedback incidences and protect the health and safety of our interpreters. No, I have Mr. Simon Tremblay.
Oui, juste un petit comment.
Yes, a comment, Mr. Chair. I'll wait for you to put your earpiece on. Just a small comment. We've tended to end meetings far later than expected. In fact, last time we ended about 40 minutes after the end expected. So it would be good to actually keep to our schedule because we all have busy schedules. At 10:30, I have to leave. I have to be in my office. So it would be nice if we could restore that discipline.
Yes, point well taken. We did notify the committee last time that there was going to be a 15-minute delay or extension, but point well taken, and we all have demands, so I'll try to keep it on time. Shelby, new one.
It was me, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, in the interest of time also, let you know that if anybody from a non-party status decides they want to ask a question, I won't be giving unanimous consent.
Fair enough. So I ask all participants, as I said, to address those guidelines, and I would like to remind the witnesses and members to please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use their hand raise function, and the clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can. For interpretation, use your earpiece and select the appropriate channel for either floor English or French, and also available on Zoom. Again, all comments should be addressed to the chair. Before we begin, and welcome the witnesses, I would like to provide a trigger warning. We may discuss very sensitive experiences of sexual misconduct, and this may be cause of distress. If need be, please advise the clerk. It's important to recognize that these are difficult discussions, so let's try to be compassionate in our conversations. I would like to welcome our witnesses. William Chesham, Master Warrant Officer, retired. Helene Le Seclier, if I pronounced correctly, veteran and PhD candidate by video conferencing. Christine Wood, Donna Van Ludsden, Director of the Survivor Perspectives Consulting Group, and Diana Hill Rose, Peer Support Advocate with the United Federation of Canadian Veterans. I would now like to invite Ms. Le Seclier to make her opening statement. And I apologize if I mispronounced your name. You have up to 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, member of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I appear before you as a veteran who served 26 years in the Canadian Armed Forces, as a PhD candidate in social work, as a chair of the Advisory Council for Veterans at the Chronic Pain Centre of Excellence, as a member of the Women Veteran Council at Veterans Affairs Canada, and as a survivor of sexual assault and ongoing harassment committed by a senior officer, harassment that continued even while I was deployed abroad. A few days before deploying to Afghanistan while I was a captain and a second in command of a company, the brigade commander, who later became a general, sexually assaulted me. Once deployed, the behavior continued. Persistent messages, tracking my movements during an official visit, and even an incident inside the Tactical Operations Center where he pressed his genitals against my workstation during an official briefing. At no point in Canada or in Afghanistan did I have safe avenue to report. I want to be very honest with you. I never reported, not because I misunderstood what happened, but because the risks were far too great, legally, professionally, and personally. In Canada, reporting him meant entering a system he influenced. In Afghanistan, there was no civilian jurisdiction, no independent investigative body, and no protective infrastructure. For over 10 years, major reports, Deschamps, Fish, Arbor, have identified these same failures: lack of independence, conflict of interest, absence of jurisdiction overseas, inadequate support mechanism, and a culture that protects rank before truth. Bill C-11 does not yet correct these structural gaps. The first issue is independence. A survivor cannot be expected to navigate a process controlled by the person who harmed them. The second issue is extraterritorial jurisdiction. Statistic Canada shows that about 1 in 5 CAF members who were sexually assaulted experienced at least one assault during a deployment. Yet abroad, all the protections envisioned by C-11 simply vanish. The third issue is choice. Survivors must have the right to choose between civilian and military systems at all times, regardless of location or rank. Choice is not procedural, it is freedom. Freedom of our aggressors and freedom from the silence that institutions have imposed on us. But I want to be clear, even with this choice, neither system is sufficient on its own. The military system understands the operational context. The civilian system provides independence and oversight. This is why I believe the real reform must move towards a joint, hybrid investigative system, culturally informed, trauma-informed, independent, and capable of protecting survivors everywhere, in Canada and in deployment environments. To move towards that vision, I offer the following recommendations. Codify a survivor's right to choose a civilian or military pathway, create an independent investigative body for cases involving senior officers, establish an extraterritorial investigative mechanism for deployed personnel, mandate rigorous, standardized, trauma-informed training across the system, and introduce clear, enforceable consequences for senior leadership misconduct. Sorry, I have another one. Begin development of a joint hybrid civilian-military model that provide full 360-degree protection. Mr. Chair, members, my silence was not a personal failure. It was a predictable outcome of the gaps that still remains today. Bill C-11 must do better. For those who currently serve, for those deployed abroad right now, and for all those who, like me, carried the burden of silence because the system gave us no safe alternative. Thank you. I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you for your opening statement. Mr. Chisholm, you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify. I worked at the Sexual Misconduct Support and Resource Centre for 2+ years, often as the sole military liaison member and always as the only non-commissioned member. I'm not a counselor or lawyer, but an aircraft mechanic. My job as a military liaison officer was to assist the chain of command in negotiating sensitive conversations, help the affected member with military hurdles, and I also assisted alleged perpetrators with the process. I just retired with 40+ years. I've seen a lot of change. I actually lived through the purge in Coal Lake in the early 80s. I've been part of the good change as a harassment advisor and as a military liaison officer. I've had the benefit of shaping some of the new policy, and I know that the military leaders are moving forward in addressing sexual misconduct and all misconduct for that matter. I submitted the SMSRC annual report and the decision tree and the terms of reference for the position I filled. Keep in mind that the numbers in the report only reflect those who have called in to the SMSRC. The number of cases involving the military liaison team was 929 in 4 years. And I'm here to speak to some of the failings. There was work on the decision tree in 2024. I was unable to find anything online that has changed it since the original. But the decision tree is geared towards the alleged perpetrator being guilty, and the revised one was as well. Recent changes to the DAODs removed the duty to report, which has most likely decreased the number of reported cases, but certainly did not lower the number of cases. I'm here to provide a grassroots opinion, and it can be summarized that this bill will not change the conduct of service personnel, and it will remove choice from those who are affected. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm. Ms. Wood, you have up to 5 minutes as well.
Good morning, Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. Committee members and my fellow witnesses. My name's Christine Wood. I'm a Canadian Armed Forces veteran and a longtime advocate for military sexual trauma survivors. I have served on the Sexual Misconduct Support and Resource Center's External Advisory Council for the last 5 years. I am appearing here today as an individual with extensive lived experience. In my first 18 months in uniform, I experienced almost every form of sexual aggression on the sexual misconduct spectrum. I did not report anything until I reported a rape to the military police. I would never have considered going to civilian police or pursuing justice in a civilian court. If it were all happening again today, my choices would remain the same. I'm absolutely opposed to the transfer of military sexual offenses to the civilian justice system. I support the creation of an independent system of justice for sexual crimes within the military. I support it because the CAF must uphold its own good order and discipline. That responsibility is essential for transparency and accountability. Limiting survivors to a single pathway to justice weakens our agency rather than strengthening it. We want choices. To be clear, I'm not defending the status quo. The military justice system failed me too. But replacing one system that's broken with another system that completely and consistently fails victims of sexual offenses does not create justice. It simply relocates the problem, and it removes CAF responsibility for fixing it. Transferring all criminal code sexual offenses will, in my view, increase the number of high harm incidents. Low-level sexual misconduct must be both reported and pursued, because these are the early warning signs of a toxic sexualized culture. Requiring a young, newly enrolled CAF member to walk into an RCMP detachment to report a low-level incident is unrealistic, and it will suppress reporting. The federal ombudsperson for victims of crime just released a report on November 25th of this year, and it soberingly reminds us that only 6% of civilian victims of sexual offenses report to police. Of those reports, fewer than 40% lead to charges, fewer than half of those reach trial, and fewer than half of those result in a conviction. And then, fewer than half of those who are convicted actually receive jail time. It's a half of a half of a half of a half of a half, and I don't know anyone who would want their son or daughter to rely on those odds. My father certainly didn't. In 1986, my dad, Justice Michael Boland, ruled in R.V. Askoff that trial delays were systemic and institutional. When the Supreme Court upheld his decision in 1990, almost 50,000 cases were stayed. The system was broken 40 years ago. It's still broken, and it's become even less responsive to victims of sexual crime because of R.V. Jordan. Civilian actors, police prosecutors, defense counsel, and judges do not have guaranteed training, resources, or the military cultural awareness required to handle military sexual offenses, and it should never fall to a traumatized CAF member to explain rank or chain of command, deployments or power dynamics, or career consequences to the civilian actors involved. That is not trauma-informed justice. I urge an amendment to keep low-level, low-harm offenses under military jurisdiction. I support adding a 2 to 5 year sunset clause. And finally, I ask for an amendment that allows victims the choice of jurisdiction until both systems demonstrate that justice will not remain elusive and survivors will not remain invisible. Please do not rush this bill. Not enough survivors were meaningfully consulted before the reintroduction of this bill, and too many elements of this complex and wicked problem are being left unaddressed. My dad always looked out for the underdog, and if he were alive today, I believe he'd be horrified to learn that members of an institution he served in, revered, and supported his whole life have become the very underdogs that he so fiercely fought to protect. We can and we must do better. Thank you. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Ms. Van Leusden, you have up to 5 minutes.
Je veux que tout le monde ferme
I want everyone to close your eyes.
pendant que vos yeux sont fermés.
While your eyes are closed, think of your last sexual experience.
Think back to the last time that you had sex. I want you to remember the last time, everything about it. Sights, sounds, tastes, everything. Pensez à votre partenaire.
Think of your partner. Is it someone you know? Is it a new person? Who took the first step?
Who undressed who first? What color underwear is your partner wearing? Do any of them have any scars, tattoos, anything unusual? Do you? Do you know how long you were there? When it started, when it stopped? I want you to remember it in minute detail. Quand vous êtes prêt, ouvrez les
When you're ready, open your eyes.
mind, open your eyes. Now imagine if we now made you go around the room and share your last sexual experience. It should be easy, right? It's something that you participated in and hopefully that you enjoyed. It's not a violation. You weren't traumatized by it. And yet we do that with no understanding on how to support a survivor when they do come forward. My name is Donna Van Leusden. I'm a Canadian Armed Forces veteran and the co-founder of a national program that teaches leaders, peers, and communities how to support survivors of sexual violence, regardless of whether there's an investigation, regardless of whether charges are laid, and regardless of judicial income. We teach that a not guilty verdict does not mean it did not happen, and that the survivor's support must never hinge on the outcome of a legal process. That context informs everything I'm about to say. I want to discuss this from the perspective of someone who's lived inside the system, as a survivor, as an officer, and as someone who spent years supporting others who carry similar scars. This bill removes choice from survivors and reduces flexibility. For many years, survivors in the Canadian Armed Forces had limited or flawed options, but they still had options. Under this bill, criminal code sexual offences committed in Canada, survivors are given none. Everything has to go directly to civilian police and civilian courts, regardless of what the survivor needs, prefers, or feels safe with. That is not trauma-informed, and that is not survivor-centred, and it may offer less flexibility than the military system ever did. Civilian courts are already overwhelmed, and Jordan applications are rising at an alarming rate. In 2017, about 15% of adult sexual assault cases exceeded Jordan timelines. By 2023, that number doubled to 30%. Nearly half of those were stayed or files withdrawn. 2 cases involving CAF members, including one incredibly high-profile case, already collapsed under Jordan delays. Charge laying is decreasing, even as reporting increases. Between 2015 and 2019, the proportion of police-reported sexual assault cases that resulted in charges dropped from 42 to 36. That means fewer survivors received their day in court, despite increased willingness to report. Conviction rates in civilian courts appear higher, but the comparison is misleading. Civilian conviction rates for sexual assaults hover around 55%, while military convictions may be closer to 28%. But the civilian system filters cases heavily before they reach trial, creating a selective rather than effective system. Civilian courts are not consistently trauma-informed. The London Hockey Canada trial is a powerful example. In the 91-page ruling, the judge framed normal trauma responses, fragmented memories, disassociation, delayed reporting, as credibility failures. This reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of trauma science. Survivors' memories are not linear. They're sensory, fragmented, often disordered, yet the ruling treated these reactions as evidence against the complainant. Another example is the Jacob Hogard case. It took nearly 10 years from the initial complainant to the final conclusion. 10 years. For one survivor, that decade represented 10 years of emotional paralysis, reliving the assault of existing in a judicial limbo with no certainty and no closure. That is not justice. It's slow, grinding institutional harm and a stark reminder that the civilian system is already overburdened. If all military sexual assault cases move to civilian court, these systemic issues will not disappear. They will multiply. I am a survivor of a Summey trial. I was questioned by my offender. I relived the assault under this questioning. That day that I was assaulted, I stood there alone, still carrying his semen on my body, and I remember thinking the institution I served, the country I served, has abandoned me. But at least he was convicted in a case that would never have been prosecuted in the civilian system. Number 2, we had a colonel with multiple victims and another offender shared by 2 of us a year apart, 2 different basic training serials, who eventually became a senior officer. When we came forward, he simply declined to speak with the police and charges were never laid. We know there are other victims out there, but no way to reach them. My right to choose. I had a case that went to civilian court. I was asked if I wanted to proceed, and I said yes. The case was ultimately dismissed before the official plea, and people asked me if everything involved in reporting him was worth it. It was. For 25 years, I thought of my rapist every day. I was not the woman, mother, officer, daughter, or sister that I should have been. He stole that from me, and I bet none of that crossed his mind, not even once. I bet you I never crossed his mind, not even once. But when he was arrested, when he had to hire a lawyer, when he had to explain himself to his friends and family, I bet he thought about me then. And that gave me closure, and it mattered because I had the choice. Being assaulted removes any sense of agency. We have to help give some of that back. Any reform that removes survivor choice is not a reform. Any reform that transfers cases into an under-resourced system is not a solution. Any reform that ignores trauma justice is not justice. Survivors deserve options. Survivors deserve resources. Survivors deserve trauma-informed systems. We deserve to be heard. And above all, we deserve choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rose, you have up to 5 minutes.
Wow. Sorry. That was a lot. My name is Diane Rose. I'm a veteran of the CAF. I lead the largest national organization for peer support and of MST in Canada. I'm committed to advocating for victims and survivors of MST because I am one. I'm a gang rape survivor. For more than 3 decades since my release, I have provided boots-on-the-ground support to victims in crisis, from accompanying victims to the hospital to sitting next to them in court. I've become known as the woman who will go in no matter what. My main areas of concern with BC11 revolve around the fact that this is a legal, policy-driven solution to a human problem. It's trying to fix people problems with words, and we all know culture eats policy for breakfast. Bill C-11 has not been drafted to serve victims or witnesses of sexual crimes. It offers very few choices and options to an individual. The bill is not being designed to address out-can deployment and attached postings. It has no provisions in it that outline the protection of physical evidence collected by MPs while out-can. Most bases in Canada aren't able to do this as well, and they should be. Do I need to define out-can? Or you guys know that? Okay. I'm concerned that SMSRC is bound by privacy policies that prevent them from approaching victims, leaving it to traumatized victims to find their own resources, or hope that the civilian police or healthcare providers dealing with them know about the SMRC and are willing to recommend them to the victim. Not everyone trusts the SMSRC for a variety of reasons. First, SMSRC can be hard to find. Not everybody knows about the organization because they have no visibility on major military bases. I spent this summer traveling through Eastern Canada, and I took it upon myself to visit as many bases as possible. In most cases, not a single sign, poster, or card was displayed anywhere that provided information about the SMSRC. I spoke to chaplains at many of these bases, and they knew nothing about the SMSRC's existence. I spoke to MPs on these bases, and many of them reported having no knowledge of SMSRC's existence. And so I take issue with the director of SMSRC testifying before this committee to guarantee that SMSRC will be able to offer support to victims of sexual crimes when the offenses are being tried in civilian court going forward, given the fact that many people have a hard time finding them. I have personally been to many civilian courts and court martials to monitor the situation and be there in case support was needed. The SMSRC was not at any of these trials, citing lack of awareness of the trial taking place as the reason. Due to this, I am extremely worried that the provision in the bill surrounding victim liaison officers and victim survivor services will further separate the SMSRC from complaints and contribute to fractured support systems. I'm also concerned that the cases transferred to the civilian system without guaranteed founding, training, and resources will re-traumatize the complainant. I highlight that sections 80 through 90 of Bill C-11 deal with SMRC and VLOs. These clauses need to be reviewed and amended to replace survivors at the center. I also support the 2 to 5 year sunset clause on the bill.
Thank you all for your opening remarks. We're going to proceed with the first round of 6 minutes. With you, Mr. Cabot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank our panel for their service and, honestly, their very powerful testimony, and I will acknowledge the courage it took for all of you to share that today. And if my questions make you uncomfortable, please just let me know, and I'll move to a different question. But I truly respect what you've done today. And I only have a few minutes, so I won't be able to ask questions of everyone. But Mr. Chisholm, thank you for the work you've done at the SMSRC. Could you briefly describe some of the duties as a liaison officer, and maybe share how many cases you dealt with as a liaison officer in your time there?
Yes, sir. So I was mortified when I found out the number of cases involving the MLO, and it is only a percentage of the number that SMSRC call in. But I personally dealt with over 500 cases in 2 years. Given some of those cases are double dipping, where I would talk to the chain of command or the affected member. But my job was almost a template that I was there to help affected members with military hurdles. Could be leave, could be dealing with the chain of command, etc. And a good portion was assisting the chain of command with maneuvering through sexual misconduct and their policies. Because these chains of commands, these commanding officers and chiefs weren't dealing with this every day, thank goodness, and I was. So I would tell them the steps to go through and give them and the affected members choices. Sorry?
Just interject and ask, in that process, were victims ever advised of opportunity to progress both civilian and military justice systems in that part of that process?
So I believe in the SMSRC that they weren't, but as an MLO, I always told them they have a choice.
Were you or anyone at SMSRC ever consulted on C11 at your time there?
No, sir.
Okay. And do you, in your opinion, based on the 500 plus cases that you dealt with, do you feel that victims would have been better served and knowing that there was a choice, and also having a choice of being able to go between civilian and or military systems?
Absolutely, sir. I believe that the civilian system has failed our victims, and I spoke to one last night who identifies as a victim, that she believes by going civilian that it ended her career.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm. I'm going to change to Ms. Secure, and thank you for your work that you do on the Women's Veterans Council and some of the other organizations, and I think gives you have you spoken to many other victims, and also your own opinion? I would be interested for the committee to know, do you feel that there should be a choice for civilian or military systems of justice?
Thank you for the question. For the people I've been interacting with, most of them were either scared to just report, either scared to just share the story and what they've been through. Choice was not offered necessarily. So for most of them that I was interacting with, it was never something they had envisioned. So for me, this is why choice is really, really important, and at all level. Even if we say that now it was always there that the choice was possible, some of them never reported like me because they were scared and knew the consequences. So I would say that choice is maybe on paper offered. Is it the case in reality? For most stories that I've heard, it's not the case.
Okay, thank you. And I am aware that you've appeared in front of the VAC committee. Can you share how many times you've testified in front of the Veterans Affairs Committee?
Thank you for the question. So it's I testified for 4 times.
Thank you. And have yourself or any of the other, are you aware of any other people on the Women's Veteran Council, have they been consulted on Bill C-11? Just speak for yourself if that works.
Yeah. To my own knowledge, I don't think anyone has been asked a question.
Okay, thank you. And as far as you mentioned independence and senior officers in your case, and if I could ask, were charges ever progressed in your case? Were you given that choice to choose between systems?
The choices I've made is not to report because it was directly involving my chain of command, and it was, putting at risk my deployment in Afghanistan. There was too many things at stakes for me to report, so it was never prosecuted.
Okay, thank you. Okay. You spoke of independence and senior officers, specifically in your case. Under C11, the Provost Marshal will now change to reporting under the Minister, so outside of reporting to uniform. Do you think that this would have made an improvement in your case? I'm asking you specifically because it dealt with senior officers.
Thank you for the question. So I think it would have helped. The thing is, what mechanism? There was no mechanism available for me to report when I was abroad. So I'm wondering if it would have made a difference. I'm not even sure, but probably yes.
Potentially.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kibble, we're good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry. Ms. Lapointe, you have up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to thank all the witnesses for being here today and sharing your experiences. And please feel free to decline any questions that you're not comfortable with. Ms. Wood, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on some of the testimony that we heard on Tuesday from the CAF Provost Marshal, the Director of Defense Counsel Services, and the Director of Military Prosecutions. The Provost Marshal noted that, and this is a direct quote, the CAF and the military police act completely independently from the chain of command, and it is my belief that victims have confidence in the military police and the prosecutorial service to take their allegations seriously. How do those comments align with your own experience or the experience of those that you work with?
Thank you for the question. It's been some time since I went through my experience, and all the changes that have happened recently. I would never, and I wouldn't feel comfortable going outside of the chain, outside of the military to report, because I feel like once you're, and I was new when this happened. I was a young officer, inexperienced. I didn't want to rock the boat, and I didn't want to go outside the tribe. As soon as you're welcomed in, it's you're part of Canada's biggest family. And so it feels like a betrayal. It felt like a betrayal to report anything, even though I went through some very awful moments and incidents. It was the rape that broke the camel's back. And yes, I did believe that going to the MPs was the right decision. I trusted it. I said at the time, if we have a police, is this not the reason why? I hope that answers your question, and if anyone else could.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Ms. Van Loosten, on your organization's website, there was a very powerful statement, and it says, what if being sexually assaulted didn't have to cost you your career? They faced a hard truth. The current system is failing. From that truth came a mission. Can you expand on that message and explain what aspects of the current system that you believe are failing survivors and how the changes that are being proposed might help address those gaps?
Thank you for the question. So our training, our idea was just a matter of training everybody, leaders, peers, and subordinates, how to support people at first disclosure. So within trauma, the single biggest indicator if somebody's going to recover is how their first disclosure is received. So the first time they say to somebody, this terrible thing happened, how you respond will set the stage for how they recover. So we sort of focused on that moment as being so pivotal. Why aren't we teaching everybody how to do that, similar to any other first aid? We remained frustrated with this seeming inability for some people to understand that survivors choose who they go to. We don't get to dictate. So just trying to hand it off to padres or doctors or counselors isn't enough. We need to make sure that everybody can receive that disclosure. So that's what we focused on. We're a female veteran-owned organization that started off with the idea of, wouldn't it be great if people could set the stage for recovery right at the get-go, the same way that we teach physical first aid. So that's what we do.
Thank you. Madame Le Solar, the intent of the legislation we're examining today is to address the experience of survivors. I would like your perspective on the possible PTSD aspects for survivors, especially those we have heard from during the study who have been as traumatized by the reporting of the experience of their assault, if not just as much so from the actual assault.
Thank you for the question. If I understand correctly, you're asking me if this way of reporting is exacerbating the PTSD. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So for me, it is the case because when you're telling and retelling and always going back into your story and explaining, you're reliving the same experience again and again. So it's really hard to improve your well-being and to progress in a therapeutic way when you're always, putting the person into that situation. So there's a need to be trauma informed. There's a really an important need to have specific training for people who are receiving these survivors, these persons, these victims, because there's, somebody just said it, but there's a need to understand from the beginning what's happening and not making the story over and over again be repeated. So I guess this is the main thing to keep in mind, to try to have the person believe at first time and not having the person having to tell the story again and again.
Thank you.
Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, you have up to 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. I think it needless to say that our victims and survivors here today are certainly the most courageous people in this room, and it is to be said without a doubt. I want to reiterate, like my colleagues, and I think it also makes perfect sense, that it is up to you, of course, whether you want to answer a question or not. Although my purpose is, of course, not to go back over your own traumatic experiences. But, of course, we're here. We have this bill before us that aims to correct the situation. That's already a start. But I heard you, Madam Wood, and is it Van Leusden? Yeah. I heard you. And I think, Madame Le Solar, also, I believe you were saying that we needed to avoid the transfer of jurisdiction to the civilian courts. I'm not sure if anyone else here mentioned that, but it was quite clear in your case that that was your position. Now we're faced with this bill, and that's a major aspect, this transfer. We viewed it as progress. While we agree that, I as a Quebecer, I can say that Quebec is already quite ahead on this, has its own specialized courts. It was implemented a year or two ago, 3 years max. It was often the fight that led Madame Véronique Yvon. She is a well-known figure in this movement in Quebec. We understand the fact that civilian courts are insufficient in this sense, but we saw it as some form of progress to remove from military justice, the military justice system, the authority to self-regulate. Mr. Vance said he would never be subject to it because he controlled it. Can you tell us it's still some level of progress despite everything, despite all your reservations?
I would say, thank you. I'm sorry. Is it okay? Were you speaking?
Yeah, I can go after. Go ahead.
Okay. I originally completely opposed the transfer of all cases to civilian court. and that was for two reasons. Well, three reasons. Number one, it's broken. Number two, it offers victims no choice. And number three, I believe the CAF has to maintain control over its jurisdiction and demonstrate that it can be responsible for fixing its own harms. I am extremely interested in this idea of the court that has been established in Quebec. Sexual crimes, sexual offenses are different than many other crimes, I would suggest, than almost any, from almost any other crime. And we need an appropriate place to deal with that. So I would like to pass on.
Alors oui, je pense que c'est le progrès qu'on
I think it's the progress we're looking for.
Christine, that, you know, I think that Quebec is on kind of the pointy end of this. What I would say is that it's about having the choice, having some agency, and recognizing there are some crimes that would be prosecuted within the military system that would not be prosecuted in the civilian system. So I do firmly believe that it's kind of like a mixed thing, but I do think that it's progress, that we're looking at it. I just wanted to touch on, somebody asked me about trauma after the sexual assault. I can tell you my release was in 2022, and I still had a chain of command then that when they asked me to work on a project that invited two of my rapists to attend, and I said I didn't want to work on that event because of this problem, I was told that at the end of the day I should be a professional and do my job. So that was as recent as 2022. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Le Seller. Vous avez la main levée, justement.
Thank you, Madame Le Seller. I wanted to ask you as well. You have your hands up. I'll answer in French. I personally see progress with this decision, but as I was mentioning in my opening statement, I think we need to have a system that is joint or hybrid, because the cultural aspect of the forces is important to consider, and we need to self-regulate some actions within military discipline. Nonetheless, the idea of transferring to the civilian side or having a joint system would change accountability. I think it would standardize procedures, and it might better serve and might actually serve as a model for the civilian population or the public. How much time do I have left? A minute? Just one thing that I wanted to add, and my next question is actually more for the analysts and the chair. Often proposed amendments are set aside if they not in keeping with the spirit of the act. And this is just hypothetical, just to get an idea here. Would there be amendments, if amendments of that nature were to be proposed, would that be in order?
Just a moment. Si vous n'avez pas la réponse maintenant,
if you don't have the answer right now, get back to us perhaps in writing. So, unless you have that right now.
Si je peux me permettre.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I think that's a question that the legislative clerks could answer. Could the question be asked and transferred to this clerk?
Merci.
Thank you. So, on the issue of these specialized courts,
5 minutes.
Through you, I would like to rapidly hear from each witness the date, the year of their release from the military. Starting with you, Mr. Chisholm.
November 11th, 2024.
Yeah.
May 14th, I believe, 2014.
30 March 2022.
2022.
1983.
Okay. And Ms. Lescalier?
Yes, it's April 2016.
Okay, so then, Mr. Chisholm, we heard from the Provost Marshal General that a lot has changed in the last 10 years, and that the military police and the whole structure is very well equipped to handle assaults of a sexual nature. In your observations, before you released. Would you please tell me if that would be factual or if that's what you saw reflected?
Thanks for your question, ma'am. In my opinion, the Provost General is working at a level way above the actual level of the workers. And the victim I spoke to last night was embarrassed at how poorly the military police handled her case, which was, in fact, a pat on the bum at work. The military police pointed the fingers at the CO, and the CO pointed the fingers at the MPs. But do I believe they have improved? Since I joined, yes. But do I believe that they are adequately able to investigate major criminal cases? I would say no.
Criminal cases of the nature of a sexual assault that would not automatically be sent to the
or
murder.
Possibly of any criminal cases, because they, as the CAF is so undermanned, they are not trained to the level of a civilian investigator.
Okay. So we also heard that the military criminal justice system is separate and apart from the chain of command, that there's no interference from the chain of command. Could you substantiate or verify whether or not that is true?
Good question. I believe that they intend to be separate and independent. And I believe the military police and the CFNIS believe they are independent. I think there could be some direction, but I'm not aware of that at what level.
Okay, so Ms. Lesculier, you, in your comments, said that you knew what the consequences were if you reported. What were those consequences?
Well, for example, thank you for your question first. The day after he assaulted me, I received a phone call, and it was not solicited. And he said, "Do you know who it is?" And I said, "I'm not sure." And he said his name. And he said, "You probably know how I got your number." And he said, "Because I'm the brigade commander, I can have access to every information I want." So for me, it was clear that because it was the brigade commander from which I was in a unit in that brigade, if I were to just report something, that it would be eventually in the know of my reporting. So for sure, there's consequences. And I was thinking, will I be relieved from tossed, away from my deployment in Afghanistan? And when it happened in Afghanistan, what would be the consequences? If I'm, talking about a new general, a new appointed general that is coming visiting and as an official person, for sure, I would be, I would be relieved from my duty for sure.
Okay, so Ms. Wood, you said that there should be an independent system for dealing with sexual assault. So independent from what or whom?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. In my view, and from what I've seen, I like the idea of something similar to, what is it in the States? CNIS?
Oh,
NCIS. Yeah,
NCIS.
NCIS. I envision it being under DND, not under CAF. Like I envision some kind of a Chinese firewall, like something that would separate the two, but still allow for accountability and transparency.
Where would the judges come from in this separate system that's independent from CAF and the civilian courts?
Right. It's a good question. My impulse is to answer that they should be military judges. I have given some thought to the idea of the DMP, Director of Military Prosecutions, and wondering if there should be a dual role there, an overlap with a civilian authority and the military, and also staggering their term their terms so that there's continuity going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Ms. Glenn. Mr. Watchorn, you have up to 5 minutes.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I admire your courage for being here with us today. It's really not easy. Today, we're here and we're trying to work on a bill that aims to improve the situation for victims. We're all here for that reason. We want victims to be well treated, that their case be well evaluated within the system. Justice Arbor consulted 14,000 people before making their recommendation to transfer the sex assault cases from these military to the civilian jurisdiction. At the end of the day, the recommendation is to do that transfer. And I have a quote from Professor Megan McKenzie, who highlights this view. I'll read it in English.
I would just reiterate that the idea of having a choice is somehow better for survivors is actually, I would say, inaccurate for most of the victims of sexual assault and survivors that I've spoken to. Sorry.
But they're having a tough time catching you.
Thank you. I'll let him do that. In the moments following an incident of sexual violence, it is very difficult for a victim to understand the consequences of that and the complexity of that choice. The default position for many survivors is to work within the military justice system, not because they think it's better, but because that's the system that they're in. It's the institution that they trust, and you have spoken to that today. Many survivors after that process wish that they had been given a different option and are not satisfied with the choice. We know from that same research that I mentioned that there are examples of plea bargains within the military justice system being used in cases of serious sexual assault cases. So allowing individuals to plead guilty to lesser military-specific disciplinary offenses. So like disgraceful conduct to avoid a criminal conviction. For me, I think this choice, or this idea of giving victims a choice or giving survivors a choice, is somehow adding, I think, is a misnomer. It does not enhance their experience. Now, I know you have contrary opinions to all this, but I'd just like your perspective on what Dr. McKenzie says. How do you view that opinion? I'd like to start with Ms. Wood, if possible.
Thank you for that very important question. I believe that Ms. McKenzie's work has focused extensively on high harm, high risk incidents. I believe the title of her book is Good Soldiers Don't Rape. Yep. I believe, as I said in my opening statement, requiring a newly minted member to go into an RCMP detachment to report a low-level harm is just unrealistic. I apologize that I'm not at my best today, committee. I am usually better. I would love to be able to submit some answers in writing later.
That would be great.
I'm just sorry.
That would be excellent. I'm sorry. Ms. Van Loosen, if you'd like to chime in.
I do agree that I think for probably what we'd consider the high harm behaviors, yes, that potentially the civilian court system is preferable. I kind of have both ends because I did go through a summary trial, and it was a case that would not have been prosecuted if it had been on the civilian side. So I'm very aware of the fact that in that case, the military system was better. Okay. But I have also had, a couple of files sort of crawl their way up the civilian side. I think, again, that the important thing is we're looking at it and we're trying to come up with a solution. There's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, no. But I think that one of the pieces that's really being missed, and it's the same thing that the CAF itself missed with all of its training, is whatever solution we come forward with, those people have to be trained on how to support survivors through it. Because, Dr. McKenzie commented that people are feeling dissatisfied with the outcome. There is no outcome that would make it better. Like, if my rapist had gotten up, walked out of the room, gotten hit by a bus, and was vaporized, I still have to process what happened to me. It doesn't matter one iota that they're not on this planet anymore. So it's not enough, and we have to be really cautious about having survivors sort of wrap that verdict up in that's what they need, because at the end of the day, regardless of what the outcome is, it's not enough.
Okay. Monsieur.
Do I still have some time, Mr. Chair?
You guys are doing great, and Ms. Wood, your testimony is very much appreciated. You can bring it into writing, but you're doing great, and we don't want you to feel any pressure here, but whatever makes you feel better in terms of writing a response is appropriate. I'll give you time as well as necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm usually better with my words.
Your words-
I really apologize that I'm not as articulate as I usually am this morning.
No need to apologize. Your words
I'm a
are
little
strong,
embarrassed,
and
but
you're
thank you.
very, very brave for being here. We appreciate that. Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, you have 2.5 minutes.
Oui. Ben, écoutez, j'allais...
Thank you. Actually, I was going to ask you a question, Madam Wood. I'm not sure if it's a good idea for me to ask you the question, or should I ask someone else?
Alors, ben, écoutez...
Okay. Well, you, as a survivor, can you tell us why you think it's important to really understand all aspects of military sexual misconduct? Let's say we adopt policies on leadership or all the way to legislation. Why is that the most important issue to address for the Canadian Armed Forces? Take your time. And actually, we could also suspend if there's a problem or it becomes difficult. We have means to wait, and you're okay.
Okay, no, I would like to answer this. Thank you so much for that question. Through my experience and over the last 10 years, I have seen that military sexual trauma, abuse within service, is the single biggest predictor of future problems. Housing insecurity, homelessness, reduced income after release, a difficult time transitioning, the risk of suicide. Military sexual trauma is at the heart of those problems. If we do not get it right, we are leaving all those other problems just out there hanging. We have committees going on right now talking about suicide prevention. Why are we not talking about MST in that community? I would love to submit more later, but truly, I feel like MST is at the center, the nexus.
Est-ce que je peux ajouter un peu?
Ben oui, allez-y.
Alors, dans les États...
Yeah, actually, in the U.S., after the Invisible War film, they did a study on people who were released from the United States forces, and the number is 1 out of 2 if they are not provided the right support.
At first disclosure, leave voluntarily within a year. So 1 out of every 2 survivors. That's not including, we have people currently going through their exit to the CAF due to vicarious trauma, due to supporting somebody through the system and being injured. We are losing people in droves, and nobody wants to join an organization that is on the cover of the newspaper every other week for being hateful or full of rapists. We have to fix this issue. It is now a national security issue, and I can't help but feel like everybody just kind of wants it to go away without fixing it, and we need to start addressing this.
What's up? Mr. Anderson, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. My question, first of all, Mr. Chisholm, have you had an opportunity to go through Bill C-11?
Not clause by clause, sir. Thank you for the question, but it's very legalese, and I have read it, and I've made some notes of some issues that I feel that are there.
Okay. If we were able to take out the provisions that limited choice and allowed people to go into both civilian or military as they choose, would you amend the bill that way?
Yes, sir. I believe that people need to be given that choice.
Thank you. Ms. Wood, first question, same question. Have you had a chance to read C-11?
I have read parts of it. I am not a lawyer.
Okay, fair enough, either am I. If you had a choice to, if you had a chance to remove the provisions that remove choice, would you make that change?
I support choice. I would never support removing choice. And I definitely believe we need the sunset clause on this to make sure that we can reassess the scope of this.
Thank you. Ms. Van Loosen, first question.
I would do two things. I would.
Have you reviewed C11?
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
I have reviewed it. I am also not a lawyer, but I have reviewed it. I would again add the choice, the option, and the only other thing I would is that the people that are working in this area need to be trauma informed.
Absolutely.
To avoid the 91-page decisions blaming the survivors for the outcome.
Sure. Ms. Rose.
I have read the thing cover to cover, and I went and got the legal dictionary out, and I defined every single word and phrase in that bill. We cannot remove choice. We need to have trauma-informed people responding at the very first level. And, yeah, that's...
Thank you very much. And I'm going to take a shot at it. Ms. Chalou? Close? Okay. Have you had a chance to review C11?
I reviewed it, same as the other people, in parts, I would say, because it's very legal driven. I agree that we need to change the wording and offer the choice. And definitely we need to have also people trained to be more trauma informed.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chisholm, you said something that struck me, and I'd like you to explore that a little bit. You said that, I believe you said that the system is geared toward conviction. Is that, did I misunderstand what you said?
No, sir. If you can go onto the SMSRC site and look at the decision tree, that is a tool for commanding officers and chiefs about what avenues to take. There's no way out. Even if the person is found not guilty, it goes to admin action. The revised same document went the same way, and in the end, it was actually, I was in policy in CPCC at the end. I kept saying, where is the way out for an innocent person? So both the current decision tree and the amended one are geared towards not an alleged perpetrator, to a perpetrator.
Okay. All of you have spoken, and in particular, Ms. Wood, you've spoken about the military cultural awareness. I'm in the military. I was in the military as well. I don't think there's a lot of understanding out there amongst Canadians as to what that really means. I remember also being a young officer with no clue what's going on around, and in fact walking with a coffee cup in my right hand, which is the wrong thing to do around. Yep. Well, you have to salute. If you're saluted, you have to salute back, and you can't. Can you explain that a little bit, please?
Yes, I can try. Thank you for the question. I think this is a crucial part of this. And I'm kind of looking at this mostly from the experiences of my father. As a judge in the civilian court system, he routinely was educated. He went to conferences to be kept up to date on legal developments. And given what they have to do already in a year, a civilian judge, to keep up to date with everything, downloading this into their laps, and not just the judges, but also the Crown prosecutors, defense attorneys, like everyone involved, it is so hard to understand the language. It's so hard to understand the power dynamics, and it is so difficult to have to explain it. I have to explain it often in therapy. My therapist is not from the military, and so I have to explain all of these different things to them. It's exhausting. It's demoralizing. And to prevent that from falling on the victim or the complainant in a process like this, the judges, the police, the prosecutors, the defense attorneys, they need that training regularly. They need the support. I guess they're called secondments. Am I getting that right? I think. So increased cooperation, if that has to happen. But just downloading it. I think we have one MOU signed with Ottawa. What about the rest of the provinces? What's happening? So dedicated funding and resourcing.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Mr. Anderson. Ms. Raminato, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here. If any of my questions you'd prefer to submit a response in writing later on, please feel free to do so through the clerk. I'd be happy to have that. This has been an incredibly helpful panel for us, but it's also been very difficult for you to come and share your stories very publicly. But it's actually very helpful for us to understand the application of this bill should it go through and how it would work. So this is actually very helpful for us to get a better understanding about how this would work on the ground in real time. I want to start first with Ms. Wood. You had made an interesting recommendation, and you just followed up on that in the sense that because civilian systems don't really understand military life. I'm a military family. I have children serving. So, you know, we get the acronyms, we understand what it means, we understand what an outcan post is, and so on. But we also understand the culture. And having to explain that to a civilian that is not trained in military speak can be very difficult, because it's difficult enough to report a sexual assault, let alone having then to try to educate the person on, well, why didn't you leave well, I was actually on a ship. I couldn't leave. So you mentioned perhaps putting it under D&D, but not under CAF. And I thought that was quite interesting. Would you like to elaborate a little bit about kind of how that could help perhaps eliminate the problem of not understanding the military culture, but also keeping it a little more independent? If you could elaborate a little bit so that I can understand how it would work.
I will definitely elaborate more in writing.
Okay.
The way I kind of think of this idea of DND CAF, this is probably a poor choice of word, but it's like cousins. They're cousins. They're of the same family, but they have different, perhaps, backgrounds, experiences, sets of expertise. And I think there's a lot of potential to go down that road, but I really would want to give you a more fulsome answer in writing.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Now, what we've heard in testimony and is that up until 1998, sexual assault in the Canadian Armed Forces were investigated and prosecuted in the civilian realm. They were not, it was moved to the CAF in 1998, so from 1998 to 2021. And in Justice Arbour's review, after speaking with over 14,000 survivors, she explained that you cannot remove that fear of reprisal and chain of command. It's basically one of the only employers in Canada that investigates and prosecutes itself. Like there's no other workplace in Canada that if you were sexually assaulted, that your supervisor would be, you know, investigating and prosecuting. And so removing that from the Canadian Armed Forces would eliminate that fear of reprisal, and it would eliminate I don't say it would eliminate, but the culture perhaps would change, because we mentioned a little bit about those indicators, those low risk behaviors that are happening in the Canadian Armed Forces that sometimes result in sexual assault. So would you agree that moving back into the civilian could at least remove the fear of investigating yourself and fear of reprisal. I don't know if anyone would like to, perhaps, yeah, Ms. Rose.
Well, first of all, I responded to a military base where there was a rape that happened recently.
Okay.
And the woman said, I don't want to report this. I took her to a hospital. We had the rape kits done. She does not want to report. She wants to finish out her career. I give her all of that. We are here for her. We have a good support system for her. So now with this system, the way the chain of command, we're missing out on a lot of stuff here. The way the chain of command worked was I would go to my master corporal and say, Joe touched my bum. And the master corporal would say, go tell Joe not to do that again. So then Joe continued to do that, and I would go and tell my sergeant. He'd say, well, what did the master corporal tell you? That is the old system. The new system, where then we had, reporting and stuff like that. Nowadays, these guys, if something happens, it gets reported, and people say stuff. Our men and women are standing up and saying, don't do that. And this is where culture and change is happening and still needs to continue to happen. As far as the bill goes, there's really nothing on the bill about that, but we need to continue on with where we're at, and I, like she said, a sunset clause on this.
So part of the bill also includes a probationary period, which is something that we hope people who join the Canadian Armed Forces are not going to have bad behavior. I mean, this is what the expectation is. But should bad behavior be demonstrated early in the career, that there's a mechanism to remove them quickly that currently doesn't exist. Ms. Rose?
Kick the bums out.
Yeah, I agree.
We also have a lot of issues now with different cultures coming into the military. And in different countries, they have different laws and different ways of life. And so this training needs to be every day, not just once in boot camp. It needs to be every day, and say, no, you can't do that.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. Mr. Cramp-Newman, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Indeed, these are sensitive conversations, and I would like to start by thanking all of you for your vulnerability in sharing these. In addition, I'd like to thank all of those who may be viewing that are serving or have served, and of course all of you in the room. So thank you very much. I'd like to just recap. There's been a lot of consistencies in today's testimony. Too much at stake, legally, professionally, personally. Survivors must have the right to choose between civilian and military. Choice of jurisdiction. All stakeholders need to be taken into consideration. Survivors deserve choice. Survivors deserve resources. This bill removes choice. Military sexual trauma is at the heart. It's the nexus of many problems. We have to fix this issue. People need to be trained to be trauma informed. This is pretty consistent and pretty disturbing, and recognizing that we are here today discussing Bill C-11 with its aim to correct the situation. So we're trying to find the median here. I'd like to open up my first question with either Christine, Donna, I'm open, I'm Diane. Can you describe how your experiences were influenced by the system and how you were rooted into civilian or military?
So I can tell you the one that I deemed successful because it resulted in a conviction. It went to summary trial, so you're questioned by the accused. That's different. The commanding officer of the unit of the member that did it had mandatory required attendance. So I got to testify in front of 300 of my closest friends. Yeah, it was, and when I arrived to testify, I was sat on a bench in a hallway beside the accused's girlfriend, who spent the entire time insulting and making comments. It was, I would say that the summary trial was far more traumatizing than anything that happened in that room. And
Folks, if we could just keep the chatter down a little bit. Thank you. Proceed.
Sure. And just to add on that too, because I think it's important when we talk about being trauma-informed, I've been told since by the chain of command that's what doctors and padres are for. I can tell you that my padre approached me the morning after my assault, and when I told him I'd had bad dreams that night, he responded with, "Am I sure I wasn't sexually aroused by the experience?" And that's supposed to be somebody that you're supposed to be able to go to for counseling. Wow. It's really important that we do the best that we can to get this as right as we can because of the amount of harm that is done when it is not done right.
Thank you for sharing. Did you feel that your autonomy was respected? And I'm curious how your leadership responded when you shared your concerns.
My leadership responded, I was a public affairs officer, so I was a one of. The one sexual assault happened on exercise. I began receiving media calls about my own sexual assault and was told that I should write the lines to respond to the media. And when I replied that perhaps I wasn't the right person, the response was, at the end of the day, we expect you to do your job.
Wow. And from a timelines perspective or a transparency perspective, how did you feel about that?
I felt that I was fairly well informed on that one, and it happened pretty fast. The assault happened in May, and by August, they had the summary trial. So that's how fast it can happen. Mm-hmm. Whereas cross and compare that to the one that went through the civilian process, it was still in pretrial motions for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm. I really hope that all of you that are witnesses here today and online as well, that you're feeling heard. It's not one of us around this table ought to deem to be experts in this. Mind you, I do have some colleagues on the table that have been in the CAF, but nonetheless, I want to thank you, and I'd like to give this opportunity. Perhaps, Diane, is there anything that you would feel that you haven't had a chance to express? I know in your testimony you had a lot of information. Is there anything that you feel that's missing that you would like to add to committee today?
It's points 80 through 90 on the bill on VLOs and yeah. I don't understand why a survivor would pick their best friend as a VLO, because if you don't know the systems and you don't know who to go to, I mean, you're not going to go to your mom and say, "Mom, go talk to my colonel." You know, your mom has no idea who your colonel is. So there's that issue on picking your VLO and who's the best VLO for you. Then there's the mental health aspects on it. If you go into a civilian system, they automatically, if you get raped and you go to the hospital, the police call the Rape Crisis Center and they come in and they talk to you. But if we go in and nobody can call SMSRC, it's me who has to call SMSRC. And if I can't find their number and I don't know, SMSRC is going through a name change right now. So what was the one that Dignity and whatever? It's like, is this a funeral parlor or something that we're looking up here? Come on, please. So if you remember, oh, there was something sexual organization, then you can look up sexual organization in the military. But I'm not going to go look up dignity and response, or, you know, we can spend the money more wisely, I think.
Thank you.
Sir Millett, you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you again. I will echo my colleagues' comments on thanks for your bravery and your commitment to showing us your vulnerability today. And Bill, thank you for being an ally. As a father of 2 daughters, grown daughters, I appreciate your work, and thank you for your service. I'd like to talk today, and I know a little bit of which I speak. So we've been speaking a little bit today about understanding the culture, and I'm lucky, I think, in some respect. I not to the extent that some of my colleagues who have served, but As a civilian journalist, I have deployed I've been to Somalia, Bosnia, Haiti. I've lived in some of the places you folks have lived in and served in. So I understand that culture, and it is difficult, I think, for some of us in the civilian world to an unimaginable degree to understand that. And Ms. Wood, I think you alluded to that. So, but the Provost Marshal General in previous testimony here told us that trust us, and again, this is somebody from the military justice system telling us in the civilian world, trust us that since 2021 onward, the culture of the military has improved drastically, and the changes are happening at such a rate that we ought to, have faith that the changes are coming sufficient, that the system needs to be, doesn't need quite the overhaul that this bill would suggest. So I'm going to direct my question first initially to Ms. Le Selleur. You did not report, you said, because the system, or that would mean you're entering a system he influenced. That's a direct quote to a reference to your attacker. So my question then is, where is trust then in this world, and how do we assess, or what is your assessment? And I'm going to open it up after you speak to this precisely, but where is trust in this system right now for the rest of you to answer that question?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to answer in French, so it's going to be easier for me.
The chain of command requires loyalty. Also, it requires confidence. But when you see that the high-ranking officers can act in these ways where there's no genuine punishment, nothing demonstrated, there's no deterrence either, I think it's very difficult to have full confidence in the system. So confidence has more to do with the support from your peers or people supporting each other, but it's not so much towards the chain of command. So the fact of not reporting, as far as I'm concerned, was mostly to protect myself. Would I have been believed? That's the first question. If I disclose what actually happened, the assault, will my own chain of command believe me? So this whole notion of confidence, when you see that certain things happen but nothing is done about that, it undermines it, and actually it destroys our confidence. Thank you.
Thank you. And further to that point, I will open it up to the others here who may speak. Madame Justice Bro reminded us in her report that even the perception, I believe, of the change of command influence in the military police is enough to break that trust. So she also said that the fact that the military police wear the uniform that the chamber of command, or the chain of command does, is enough to make them to be perceived to be part of the chain of command or close to the chain of command. So my question to the rest of you is, where or how do you suggest is this a culture change, or is this it's a structural change? I'm trying to get my head around this because of the uniqueness of the chain of command and bringing that complaint in what is perceived to be a chain of command structure.
So I think that transparency and communication has to be the first, action. If we can get to the point where everybody within that chain of disclosure operates from a position of belief. And when I say that, I don't mean that they automatically assume that the accused is guilty. I mean that when they are meeting with somebody, they support that that person is traumatized. They can see that that person is injured. And that support is the position that you start from. Because if you start from there, everything else can fall into place. So I think that over-communicating, so being really transparent about everything and coming from a place of belief. The military hasn't always found that easy, right? Because we, generally speaking, we do things a certain way, and because that's the way we've always done them. But even up to and including a very simple example, I got a call from somebody who said they were supporting a survivor. They needed to send a significant incident report up, but the survivor wasn't in a position where they were ready to disclose, what should they do. And I said, talk to the survivor and show them what you're writing. And they sort of went quiet for a second, and they said, that didn't even occur to me. And I said, it's a way of giving them flexibility within an inflexible system, right? I think that we need to make sure that we don't have things like accused going to court in their uniforms. Because even though, and ultimately found not guilty, and I'm not getting into the weeds on that, but the visual of watching a senior officer going to court in uniform to defend themselves against allegations, and the judge in their comments even said that they believe the survivor, they don't believe that that was necessarily the person that did it. That sort of stuff has to stop because it undermines everything that survivors are out there suffering.
Thank you.
It's an excellent point. Can I just, one?
We're over time quite a bit.
It's not a question. It's a public service announcement. Just quickly, if anybody is listening, there's a 24/7 anonymous telephone number for the SRC, and it's 1-844-750-1648. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me.
Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, you have 2.5 minutes, and I'll give you a little extra to make up the time.
Oui, merci.
Thank you. Madam Wood, we've understood your criticism of the civilian courts. You're saying that the civilian courts are not really suited to this, and we understand your logic. You're in favor of a free choice for victims. You're also mentioning a clause, a sunset clause, that after 2 or 5 years, all of this could be revised. How would we do this? Would it be through a poll from victims on their satisfaction? Would it be a look at the deadlines, a look at the results? Every 2 to 5 years, what are we actually looking at to determine if it's working or if it's not?
Thank you for the question, sir. Okay, this touches on a lot. In terms of having a sunset clause and how that would work, in my mind, if we say there's a 5-year sunset clause, at 3 years, we're starting to collect all the report and collect all the data, and that data must include more than the outcome of the trial or whether charges were laid. I think those reports have to include all of our demographic information, including rank and unit and the location of the assault, and I think that data also has to include a sense of satisfaction or a sense of justice as reported.
Donc, sous forme de sondage auprès des victimes.
So as a poll for victims? As a poll, in the form of a poll for victims? That we would send them a questionnaire? That would be one option. But the other way would be to say, did that person...
volontairement, ou est-ce que...
Did they leave voluntarily, or did they go to... Their case go to DIMCA?
They've been on 3 TCATs. There's a couple of different ways to look at it. I agree with her that it can't come down to just like conviction rates because, again, you can have a not guilty and still have a survivor that felt really supported and felt like they had their back, and that's a healthy outcome.
Et qui sera en charge?
Who would be in charge of doing that kind of assessment, do you think, for it to be impartial, for it to be fair and neutral? I'm talking about an evaluation not of victim satisfaction, but of the effectiveness of the transfer after, let's say, between 2 and 5 years. I think it needs to be an independent process.
Like somebody who's well outside, they need to have military culture knowledge, but somebody outside of DND and outside of the CAF needs to be able to look at it holistically and critically. Oui, parce que...
Yes, because the CAF is a small world.
So even when you have military judges that are outside of they still are, their roommate from RMC is an accused, that kind of thing. So yeah, it needs to be somebody independent, but somebody that can do a thorough look at the outcomes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We heard a question earlier about Canadian Armed Forces members being. Sorry, I'm not sure what you're pointing at.
Microphone.
Il fallait ouvrir le microphone pour qu'on comprenne quelque chose.
It was on
Là, c'est fait, mais
It's okay. It's resolved.
maintenant, ça va, mais ça
If I-
l'était.
Now it's fine. The mic needed to be on.
Thank you for your generosity. Mr. Chisholm, we heard a question about Armed Forces members' cases being investigated and prosecuted by their supervisor and immediate chain of command. My understanding is that, of course, it would be reported to their supervisor and chain of command. In the 500 cases plus that you dealt with, would you say that they were investigated and prosecuted by their chain of command, or was that done by the military police and the DMP, et cetera, outside of their chain of command?
Good question, sir. I think the low-level stuff can be investigated by the chain of command well, but generally, and I don't like low-level, high-level, but most commanding officers, if they feel they can't be independent, will get somebody from outside their unit to do the investigation. And I do believe anything that's been not criminal or low level, which, again, I don't like it, the military police are equipped to do that. And I believe the conviction rate, because they do it daily, is quite good. I've been to many summer trials and courts-martials where if it gets to that point, so the person has been investigated well, and generally convicted.
Thank you. So would it be fair to say, as a comparison, a police department, if a police officer had committed a crime, while it might be reported internally, then it would then be investigated by an independent police body, or in a case of a smaller department, perhaps a different police department? Would that be a similar analogy to convert from civilian to military terms?
I believe that's a good analogy, sir, and that most commanding officers are meaning well, and if they feel they couldn't be independent, that they would get an external environment.
Thank you. I want to do a quick roundtable for everybody about Dr. McKenzie refers to making a decision, I think the quote is, in the moment, following an assault. And so we'll just start with Mr. Chisholm. In your experience of what you've seen, and for everybody else, a personal experience, did you feel that you had to report immediately in the moment, or was there a time at a later time when you were removed from a dangerous situation and stuff? So just to speak to the in the moment, or were you given time? And in your case, the cases that you've seen, Mr. Chisholm, very quickly so we could get around the table.
I believe that most people are leery to report right away because they're in a trauma state. And then I believe once they're informed properly that they would have a better avenue, sir.
A safer, more appropriate time to make such an important decision. Thank you. If the rest of the panel could, if we start with Ms. Wood.
Yes, thank you, sir. I knew I had been raped for a week. I'm sorry, I was drugged and raped. I knew about it for a week, and I talked to a medical doctor on base, and he warned me that I should think twice about reporting to the MPs because reprisals often follow you around for the rest of your career. And I thought about it for 24 hours, and then I reported.
This was a week later, plus 24 hours. Did you feel you were in the moment, or that you had appropriate opportunity to make such a terrible decision?
I had time by then.
Thank you for that, and I'm sorry for what happened. Ms. Van Leusden, if you could answer the same question, please.
So 2 of my reports ended up being legacy reports about 20 years after the fact. I did not have the support that I would have needed to report at the time. In the one instance in Kingston on my course, he remained my course warrant, so I still reported to him. They actually had us all march into the office one morning because we had all, and we had to give him reasons why we'd screwed up. And the night before that was the night that he'd assaulted me. So when I walked into his office, he sort of smirked at me and asked, why I wasn't feeling well. And so just as an example.
So 20 years later was certainly not in the
Right,
moment.
but I also did one immediately.
You did one that was...
Yes. At the time, I reported immediately, they called the MPs, they arrested him on scene and took him away.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rose?
Mine is also a legacy, so mine doesn't count in that question. But on the cases that I have attended, the first thing I do is I tell them, let's take a breath, let's get the medical stuff done, go through this, I'm here with you, and then usually within 3 to 4 days they're making decisions.
Thank you, and I respect that. I think that's very good that you're counseling people to that, and I'm sure it's appreciated. Ms. Schuller.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
It happened twice in the same evening. There was a person accompanying me, and I disclosed to that person what happened. And I was deploying 3 days after, and he did ask me, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I cannot do anything because if I disclose or report right now, I might be taken out of the deployment because of all the legal thing."
Thank you. And I guess, in your case, I'm out of time.
I'm sorry.
No,
We'll have another
thank
round
you for
still.
all of everyone's
Ms.
questions.
Lapointe, you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I will cede my time to my colleague, MP Idlout.
Kuyanemik, first of all, I very much want to thank Ms. Lapointe for ceding her time with me. I very much appreciate it. As well to the witnesses for your testimony. You really have gone up above and beyond your duty. You have done so much for our country, not just wanting to serve, but to continue to be witnesses today of having to add a burden of offering solutions in this system. I think that you've been placed in a very difficult position to be both victims and to provide solutions to our study. I think that we have to share so much how much we appreciate the willingness for you to be so courageous. I'm just thinking about other people who don't have to offer solutions when they are injured, when they are traumatized, like people who go into emergency rooms with broken arms. They don't need to offer solutions. They don't need to think about what needs to be fixed. They automatically get the service that they deserve, the health care that they deserve. And we need to reach that point for victims of sexual violence. We need to reach that point where we don't need to ask victims to provide these solutions. So I really hope that we do get to that point. And with your great knowledge, your willingness to serve your country, I hope we do move forward in that way. Having said that, I would like Ms. Diane Rose and Helen to maybe answer my questions. My one question, and it's regarding the victim liaison officer. I think that that is something that we all need to make sure becomes part of the whole system. But what is it that will make sure that that position is something that can truly be of help to the victims of sexual violence?
First of all, it can't be a 25-year-old girl who just came out of university and says, I understand what you're going through. We need more of a mom figure there. And as I've been told by my sisters, that I provide that mom figure in all too often, when they come walking up to me and I hold them and I hug them. It's something that's needed. A VLO needs to be able to not just understand the trauma, but be that figurehead for the person, be able to know the system enough to be able to guide them through it, get them to mental health right away, because the faster you get to mental health, the faster you start healing, and the easier the case goes. It's very important to have, just don't give me a 25-year-old girl who tells me she knows what I'm going through, because she doesn't.
And Helen?
Yes, thank you. I guess for me, it's also about education. We still don't talk about this anymore enough. I think it's not dis displayed enough to get this information. A VLO, I didn't know what was possible when I was in service, and I'm questioning now: are the new people coming in service know what resources are available and what's a VLO? If and I agree with Diane, it needs to be someone that is going to be representing experiences and also knowledge about sexual trauma. So I guess, yes, for me, education is still a big part that needs to be happening.
Thank you so much. I will give my time back to the Liberals. Thank you.
We only have 30 seconds left. Ms. Lapointe.
No, I'll see.
Ms. Gallant. Ms. Gallant, I'll give you 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all three of you. With the brigade commander being the perpetrator, and this is to Ms. Lescalier, you implied that your career path would be impaired or ended. Did you think the consequences of reporting would put your life at risk, that you would be put in harm's way to intentionally, potentially have you killed?
Thank you for the question. I don't know if I would go up to this point, but the fact that he was able to get my personal information and my phone number, so for me, it was also meaning that he knew where I was living. So it's all information that for me is critical. So I'm not saying that it would have been, up to this point, but definitely that person was able to show up to my door.
Is that person still serving in the military?
No, ma'am. He is not.
Okay, Mr. Chisholm, was there any fraternization of information between MPs, NIS, or the liaison assisting officers and the chain of command in your experience?
Good question, ma'am. And I think it's a fact that people need to know. In the SMSRC right now, the military police liaison officer position is vacant. And the SMSRC counselors who I still talked to yesterday don't have that advice right now. But to know that the conversations occur between the chain of command and the military police, I believe commanding officers in the military police do their best to keep things separate.
Okay, so there's no sharing of information even between the lawyers and the chain of command?
I think it's very difficult in all the cases I dealt with the SMSRC to get any information from the civilian courts, in that military police liaison officers were having difficulty in getting a shadow file or any information, so much so that there's a serving member who was doing weekend time and his chain of command didn't know he was in court.
What about the military court? Was there any chance that there were conversations going on between the lawyers and the chain of command?
I believe for the betterment of the system that there has to be some discussion between the lawyers, and I believe that the lawyers should have some knowledge about the personnel record of that person.
Okay, was the principle of unlimited liability ever raised as a way to discourage any of our witnesses from reporting? So, Ms. Wood?
Thank you, ma'am. I'm not familiar with that term.
Oh, okay, Donna?
I'm sorry, can you say that? I was thinking.
Was the principle of unlimited liability ever used as a rationale for you not to report?
I can tell you that I have friends and colleagues that reported. I'm thinking of one in particular that was in the Navy and was told flat out that it would be very easy for her to have an accident.
I didn't hear what you just said.
It would be very easy for her to have an accident on ship.
Okay, and all right.
Yeah, so there's definitely been incidences like that.
Okay.
Yes.
Diane, have you heard the term?
I heard something a couple of weeks ago. If my Moby's missing, I know I'm going overboard at 3. Moby is it's a transmitter that Navy wear on their uniforms, so if they hit the water, it goes off, and it's a beacon. So you know if your Moby's missing, you're going overboard at 3 o'clock. And that's quite common in the Navy. It's you can't talk in the Navy. You just can't. You can't. You're gone. You're done. And in Afghanistan, I've heard many cases of fear of being fragged.
Fragged?
It's, yeah.
The fear of being eliminated by your own people. It's being in the military and being a survivor was trying to find a balance between recognizing that you need to be able to trust your leaders and your peers with your life, but you can't trust them with your body.
And Ms. Lescalier, were you ever told, well, you've got unlimited liability, the military, whatever happens in the military isn't their fault and don't report? Or was it implied in your case?
I think it was more implied than told. I'm familiar with the term, and for me, when we look back a few years ago, I would say decades ago, an officer had the right to on your life, over your life. So I guess it's like implicit that today something a bit like that is still going on, like not necessarily in an open way of saying it, but unlimited liability is about also excellence, honor, and when you see your superiors acting against that, then you're questioning this terminology, this principle that is driving our service.
Thank you. Ms. Van Loozen, you had your hand up. Did you have something?
Yes, I actually said it. It was talking about, because Ms. Gallant had asked a question about people being threatened, and I just wanted to.
Thank you. Mr. Watchhorn, you have up to 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, what I'm hearing here today is troubling, disturbing, and I'm having a hard time understanding how to establish confidence in an environment like that. I would imagine that it's difficult for you. Madam Wood, I'd like to have a discussion about the Quebec justice system in the sense that they have their own courts. As you know, Quebec is ahead of other jurisdictions. We have these specialized, dedicated courts that focus on sex assault. The judges are trained for this, the prosecutors as well, and all stakeholders within the system are trained specifically to address these cases. I heard you say that that's what's required, and I'd like to hear what you think about the Quebec system and whether the system, if it were exported to all provinces, would that improve your confidence in the civilian system? Or how do you think it could be implemented, Madam Wood, and then others?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Watchorn. I am very impressed with what I know and what I have heard about the Quebec system, and I believe that it does go a long way, or it could go a long way, to increasing trust and confidence in a civilian system with those resources. I absolutely would love to see that system rolled out across all provinces and territories. Sexual assault is the least underreported, or the least reported, the least charged, the least convicted crime. It's obviously different from other crimes, and it needs a different system. So I support the work that you've done, and would fully support seeing how it could work. Yes.
Madame Van Loosden, même question.
Same question for you.
We need to have people trained in, sexual trauma. It's the only crime that you're a witness and evidence. So the only way for them to defend their client is to attack the evidence, which means to attack you. So you're up there and you're trying to defend yourself against this. It's also one of the only crimes that you have to sort of prove that you didn't consent to. Nobody asks, somebody who attempted murder, did you consent to that? but this becomes a question here. I think that is vital, is to have especially trained, and I would love to see something like that. I do think, though, that military culture piece needs to be included. So I'm not sure if that would be in terms of having advisors, a partnership, something like that. But it is a different world. It is something that not a lot of people know and understand, that having somebody that can order you into harm's way, you're also your rapist, is a different experience altogether. I know that in the States, Brigadier General Sutton compared it to incest, that it cuts so deeply and it undermines everything about wearing uniform. So I would love to see a system where they have a dedicated court system for sexual crimes.
Madame Rose, même question.
Same question.
I think we need to take this up to the UN and NATO area as well, because we need to have the same laws all the way across who we're serving with. Your Brigadier General may not be a Canadian when you go overseas. So my rape doesn't count once I leave this country. And we also need to get rid of the dinosaurs that are still in the system. Recently, a civilian contractor with D&D said to another civilian who was raped in Latvia, he said, "What did you expect? Why is this guy on our tax dollars payroll?"
Madame Lessaleur, peut-être la même question. Je ne voulais pas vous exclure.
Madame Lessaleur, same question. I didn't want to cut you out of this conversation. Certainly, I think it's an excellent idea to have this dedicated court, and that's the idea that I raised in my testimony. But as Donna was saying, I'm also in favor of military advisors, or people who come from the military background, to advise on the cultural aspect. But I think it's important to make sure that the specialized court can also support people that are deployed, that the entire system takes into consideration people that are serving not just here, but abroad. Thank you very much. Do I still have time, Mr. Chair? I'd like to hear Mr. Chisholm. You haven't had much of an opportunity to speak to that point on the Quebec system that could be implemented potentially. Do you think this is a model that could be beneficial to victims?
Thanks for the question, sir. I haven't done any research into the Quebec system, but just from our conversation today, anybody trained in specialized and trauma-informed care can benefit the victims and survivors in processing it properly.
Merci pour la réponse. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Savard-Tremblay, we're almost done the evening, or the morning, I should say. I'll leave you. You have 2.5 minutes, and I'll leave it to you to keep us on time.
C'est moi qui clôt. Bon, ben, écoutez, on va essayer.
Okay, then I'll be closing us off. I'll do this as to best of my abilities. Madam Wood, Madam Van Luzden, if you had anything to add to this, even though we don't have much time. Once again, there's this issue of the system failing, or potentially the civilian system being insufficient. Would it still be insufficient if there was training for the prosecutors, the police officers, the judges, for them to sort of get a real feel for the military culture? Would that be enough, or still not enough?
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. From what I understand, it's not just a matter of training. It's not just a matter of money. I believe the figure is that there is 1.3 judges or like a professional court staff to deal with every 1 million people in Ontario. So like there are not enough judges, there are not enough courtrooms. It's more than just the military cultural awareness training that would have to go into it. I'm sorry if I'm missing the rest of the question.
Alors, c'est bon, il n'y a pas de problème.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, but do you think it would still be worthwhile? I mean, I would imagine it can't be a bad thing to get that.
Of course, it's worthwhile, and anything we can do to increase trust and efficiency is great. Yes.
So really, it's a question of resources. I do think that having a specialized court is key. Again, partnering sort of best practice civilian side with military understanding, also key. At the end of the day, my goal is to make sure that survivors that choose to go through the system do so not only with full awareness, but with all the support that they need, so that regardless of the outcome, they feel like they can put a period. They feel like they've got some closure on that side of things. Right now, we're not there. So let's get there.
C'est bon, merci. J'ai plus de questions.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
I thank all the witnesses for coming forward and presenting, and I know how sensitive it is, and I appreciate your candor, recommendations, and suggestions. And we all want to make this better for the victims, especially, and we want justice to prevail throughout. So we want the systems to work as best they can. And I appreciate the engagement by members from all sides and staff who are all very concerned about the well-being of the military, but also those that are working and serving us every day. So congratulations to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, with your permission, time is almost near. We're going to suspend. All right, so sorry, I adjourn the meeting to allow you to go to your next meeting.